Well, hi there, it's Jennifer. Welcome to my channel and welcome to this tattoo appointment with me. This one in particularly is, well, I don't know, it has a little more of a weight to it, I should say. So I've been working with my wonderful tattoo artist, Erin, for over 4 years. And she has tattooed almost my entire body. And I have loved working with one particular artist. Artists have particular signatures and styles and the way that they create art on the body. And I love the design. It's very, very cohesive. You can tell that the same artist's hand created the work. I have 2 full leg sleeves. I have 2 full arm sleeves. We've tattooed my back, parts of my neck, my feet. And anyway, it's just been a wonderful journey. I am so glad that I started the tattoo process. You know, I did not begin this journey until my 50th birthday month over 4 years ago, just a hair over 4 years ago. And, you know, at that time, I had always wanted a tattoo. I always wanted a gigantic dragon tattooed on my back, like ever since I was 19 years old. But I never found an artist that I liked back then. And in the tiny little town that I was living in, there was only, I think, like 1 tattoo shop or 2. And I didn't really care for the style, and I never really pursued it after that. And then, I'm a person of faith. I've been a Christian now for a long time. And I would say now that I'm more of a non-denominational type of, or I like the non-denominational Christian culture, I should say. But for many, many years, I was part of a very fundamental Christian Baptist group, which I'm thankful for a lot of reasons. It really helped me ground myself in the Word of God and in my faith. However, the culture was very, very restrictive, and some churches are even stricter than others. And I felt that as a creative person, I felt stifled and stunted because in some very, very fundamental Christian circles, creativity is not welcomed. You know, you're kind of expected to look a particular way that the church culture has deemed appropriate, and it's usually just one way. And when I first joined the fundamental Christian group, you know, it was also new to me, and I was learning so much about God and, you know, how to walk with God, how to pray, how to read my Bible, how to establish those wonderful habits. And those were fantastic, learning how to build my walk with Christ over all these years. But it wasn't until many years had passed and I had children, and I, was really feeling that stifling. I really wanted to express myself. I always wanted tattoos. I always wanted color in my hair, and I've always been more artistically expressive, I guess you could say. And, that's when I realized, and along with my family, that it was time for us to leave that very fundamental culture. And it took me quite a few years to kind of undo some of those cultural pressures. They were kind of like deeply embedded in me, if that makes any sense. And it took a few years to, I think, feel confident enough for me to really step into my creativity and my self-expression. And as a person of faith, our God is a very creative God. I mean, look around this globe. Just the earth itself is so diverse and beautiful. People are so diverse and beautiful. And the fact that we all express ourselves uniquely is representative of our Creator. That's from my perspective, of course, as a Christian. And anyway, finally at 50, I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to get tattooed. I'm going to start the tattoo journey. And I still had a little bit of that fear of judgment when I began my journey. And I was just like, oh, okay, I'm going to just start small. I'm going to tattoo parts of my body that nobody will see. I thought that I would do this really cute, like asymmetrical floral design. I knew I wanted florals. I knew I wanted a little asymmetry, like my shoulders, a little bit of my upper chest, and only my upper arms. Because then I thought, well, nobody would have to know that I have it. It could just be for me, my own personal for my own personal pleasure, just seeing the design on my body. But really, a lot of that was still because of my fear of judgment, of running into people who I knew from my past and then suddenly seeing me covered in tattoos, which that's exactly where I am now. And, once I began the journey and I really started to step into my authentic self and really embrace my own personal creativity, it took off. And I have tattooed almost my entire body, and I love it. It has been this beautiful form of personal expression and artistry. I love being able to give my ideas to Erin, who is such a wonderfully talented artist, and she is really good at listening in to her clients and taking her artistic talent and expressing it in a way that makes sense to each client. And I have just loved working with Erin. I have also found in my lifetime that when I have been faced with difficult times especially where it's out of my control, and we've all been there because life is happening to us all. And I was just recently diagnosed with the beginning stages of breast cancer. I have something it's called DCIS. It stands for ductal carcinoma in situ. And I have an intermediate stage of the disease, and I have some other red flags that make this of somewhat, there's an urgency in general when it comes to any type of breast cancer. And DCIS is kind of an unusual type of breast cancer because it's stage 0. And there are these different stages. There's a low, an intermediate, and a high. And I fall into the weird kind of middle intermediate stage. And basically what the disease is it is cancer cells that are mutating, but they are still contained within the milk ducts of the breast. They have yet to mutate in a way that will allow them to break through those walls and then become invasive breast cancer. And of course, the problem with DCIS left untreated is that the chances of it becoming invasive breast cancer are high. And, doctors and the patients, because, ultimately patients decide how they want to care for this, can decide, there's this whole kind of thing called like watch and wait. And that's typically for DCIS patients that are in the low category. Potentially they're elderly, potentially they're not in good health for surgery. But for people who are intermediate and high, for me, I'm going to be following medical advice. There's a lot of different people's opinions out there in the world about overtreating DCIS, but in following the medical professionals, which is what I'm doing, you need to get it out. My family, there's quite a bit of breast cancer in my family and cancer in general on my father's side of the family. My dad died of colon cancer when he was 45 years old, so I was in my early 20s. His sister had pancreatic cancer. Amazingly, she has lived to tell the tale. It's a miracle. There's another sister who had DCIS just like me in her early 50s. So I'm age 54 and was diagnosed now with DCIS. She was 51 years old, diagnosed with DCIS, and she only had a lumpectomy, no radiation and no other treatment. But the problem with DCIS is if you only do the lumpectomy with no other treatment, there's a good chance it's going to return. And that's exactly what happened to her in the same breast that DCIS returned. And in that one, then for the second time, she had a lumpectomy again with radiation. And then years later on her other breast, which was now in today's time, which is 2025, she was diagnosed with, it's called HER2 positive cancer on her right side. And that is an aggressive form of cancer. And she had to go through chemotherapy be on all the medications that go along with treating that disease. And I've also learned that I knew my grandmother had breast cancer. I don't know what kind she had, but she had a lumpectomy and radiation and never had a recurrence at all, or any other type of breast cancer. And she was diagnosed in her 60s. She lived to her mid-90s. I also learned that my great-grandmother had breast cancer and unfortunately died from it. And it was, back in the day. So there seems to be a lot of cancer in these genes. And I've been saying I have beef with our genetics here. I'm not liking it. And so this appointment, as you can see, we've been adding pink. And one of the ways that I handle news that is kind of out of my control, news that's bigger, more life impacting, is I have a lot of different ways in which I process and handle news. Number one, definitely my faith in Christ, leaning on God. I have had a daily practice of spirituality now for decades, praying, reading my Bible, listening to faith messages. That's part of my morning routine. It helps just set me up right for the day, gets my mind focused right, gets me clear, gets me situated. And definitely during times of crisis, it has helped ground me. And, I have definitely not asked God why. Like, why, God, did this happen? Because it's funny. There's some of my favorite places to talk to God is in the car. I love talking to God when I'm driving, when it's just me in the car and I'm alone. There's something about it. And in the shower, oddly enough. And if you're a person of faith and you talk to God in the shower, let me know. There's just something about it because, you got so much stuff to do, especially as women. We're shaving this, we're washing this, we're conditioning this, there's lots to do. And it just allows my mind to talk with God. I know there's something about the sound. It just feels like you're kind of enclosed in a little cocoon, and I just have conversation with God. And, there's been many times I was joking, and if you're a person of faith, you're going to understand this. I was kind of like chuckling with God and thinking, you and I have had many conversations about cancer in the shower. Because I do a lot of praying during that time too. And because I have such a strong family history of cancer, I have prayed that God would not allow me to have cancer, that he would protect my husband, my children, my family, that we would not have to walk down that road so intimately. And, here I am, and I feel very blessed to be at stage 0. It's like the best, worst place to be. That's my thing that I'm saying. This is the best, worst place to be. And I've never asked God why. And I remember telling God, even when I would pray these things, of like, oh God, I don't want to have cancer and protect my family. But I've always said, but Lord, I know that if you do bring it into my life, I know that you'll be with me and you'll help me get through it. But I'd like to ask not to, but I know that if it does come into my life, I know you've got me. And that has been my mindset. I've not asked God, why did you allow this to happen? Aren't you a loving God? And of course he is. And he's not going to leave me nor forsake me. And in fact, Psalm 23 is such a wonderful psalm. And there's a portion of scripture there where it talks about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. Tony Robbins calls it the dark night of the soul. It's like this earthly life is not our permanent home, if you will. It's like and we know that instinctually because people are coming and going, aren't they? Birth and death are happening every day. We're just passing through. And this is not my permanent home, if you will. I believe in a spiritual home in heaven. And this life it's not a perfected life. This life is full of all kinds of life experiences, but God promises to be there with us and to comfort us and to help us go through whatever it is we need to go through. And I heard this amazing sermon this week by Bishop T.D. Jakes, and he was talking about influence. He was calling it affluence, influence, and effluence. And then he called troubles in our lives basically impediments. And it was an excellent sermon. It's been a gift to me as I have been in the early days of processing the fact that I'm embarking on a breast cancer journey and what this will mean for my future. I've diagnosed with DCIS in my left breast, but there's something kind of weird going on potentially with my right breast, but it's still too small to exactly know what's going on right now. So I am just embarking on this journey. And TD Jakes was in this particular sermon was talking about these situations that come into our lives. And a lot of times we don't want them, do we? Like nobody wants, it's like, I don't want that cup. I don't want the breast cancer cup. Like, please, no, thank you. But what TD Jakes was talking about in his sermon is these difficult trials that come into our lives are the impediments. And as we go through those impediments, if you will, it allows us to have influence because we've then walked the journey. And it's kind of hard for you to give advice unless you have walked a particular journey. And he was saying, don't try to give advice with something that you've not actually gone through. And then what I really found challenging, and this is something that I'm working on as I embark on this journey, he called it effluence. What flows from you is even more of an impact than what you say and what you do. How you walk through particular trials and difficulties in your life, the way that you show up, your attitude, your energy, your aura, what you bring with you speaks volumes. And that to me was comforting because one of the things that I have been praying is, God, help me to go through this right. Help me to, and as I process my normal human emotions, by the way, I have gone through the shock and awe. In fact, it's not been quite 2 weeks yet. And I was in shock. And it's taken some time for my brain to wrap around the fact that I'm embarking on a breast cancer journey. There was almost this part of my brain, how can we get out of this? We don't have to walk this journey. Surely there's a way out. And it's nope, there's not. It's funny how the brain processes. And I'm going to do a couple of videos under my DCS playlist now and just share my process so far and then share the journey. But yeah, it's taken a little bit of shock and awe. And of course it's natural and normal to have emotions and to cry and to be scared and to be worried and, to have those feelings, 100%. But as I move through those feelings and express those feelings and then embark on each day, what is my attitude toward it? And that will speak volumes. And anyway, it was just such a gift. So this appointment in particularly, and it's kind of funny because I had 2 appointments fairly close back to back. The appointment before this one, which I'm probably going to end up posting after, was the morning that I got my routine mammogram results that showed that there was something forming that was concerning. And it was on a Sunday, and that appointment that's before this one, but I'll probably have it play after. I came to the appointment with Erin just oh no, I've got weird results. I've got to go get checked out further. Of course, had no idea that I would be indeed, having to go through biopsies and then being diagnosed. And one of the ways also in which I handle difficult times is through creativity. Oddly enough, there is something about the creative process that helps my brain to sort through the difficult trials in life. I've been that way throughout my entire life. Anytime that I have gone through something that is overwhelming or very upsetting or out of my control, like a cancer diagnosis, being able to throw myself into a creative process helps me sort through things. I don't exactly know why that is. If you're like that, let me know. It just helps me. And since we've been adding color, so Erin tattooed my entire upper body originally in the black, gray, and white. After we've done my full leg sleeves, we've been adding color to my upper body design, adding the red on the flowers, green on the leaves. And after getting this breast cancer diagnosis, I thought, you know what? I want to add pink. I want to add pink to my body because I want to remember this time of my life, this journey. And that's what we did. This just has been such a help for me to help my brain wrap around this diagnosis and to wrap around how my future is going to change, because I'm going to be on medications. And I'll explain more of that later in my other videos, but being able to add the pink to my design, adding pink to that beautiful snail down there, is also a reminder to me that God's got me. Thank you so much for spending your time with me here in this video. I will be continuing my tattoo journey as much as possible as I embark on treatment over the next couple of months, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.